This show is about two people giving their opinions. They are not experts on the matter. They are just people who want to have a chat. If you have any questions about morality or any other issues, please talk to a priest.
Yes or no? If you were king for a day, you would implement distributism.
Where is my shirt? There it is. And the shirt is not low enough. Anyway, sorry. This Catholic Family Podcast. Distributism. Okay, so this is an interesting one. I think a lot of people probably have never heard of distributism. They hear capitalism, socialism, communism, don't really hear distributism. And I think that it was really pushed by Hilaire Belloc and Chesterton, I think, back in the 1900s, and as well as others, of course. And maybe why don't you give a brief description of what it is, and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah. So, and again, I'm no expert either, but at a high level, it's basically that the government would distribute land basically to each family, right? So each family would sort of be given this parcel of land, and they'd put cows on it and they'd homestead on it, and they just kind of live that simple, more less connected sort of maybe a little bit more feudal life, but not quite that. It's sort of like a hybrid between what I would say like American ranching, American farming, but also all of that is distributed by the authorities.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the question would be, would anyone actually want it? I think, unfortunately, in these days, most people actually wouldn't want to do it because they don't want to actually work. They don't actually want a farm of their own. They don't want to live in a city. I know many people. I live in the middle of nowhere, and most people don't want that. They don't want to live they want to live in a city that has all the amenities. They have nightclubs and stuff. I mean, I've had a lot of people tell me that they just don't want to live in the middle of nowhere. So I think right now, probably not. 100 years ago would have made a lot of sense. I think now, but okay, if we're just talking about the idea of it, hypothetically, I definitely like the idea. I've said many times in the show that I think that we were created by God to be farmers. I think we're meant to work outside with our hands, to build, to grow, to replenish the earth, to feed things and to be fed by things. And I think that, from that we learn to love the land and love what God has given us, and then to love God. And I think that when you live in the city, you go to the grocery store and you buy something in a package, first of all, you're going to be pretty sick, but you also don't understand, where it comes from. Like, actually, where is this? This was given to me by someone at the grocery store. So, okay, great. It's like, no, where did it come from? It came from someone who worked the land to give it. And that came to us from God. And now if you could say, okay, it came from God to a Catholic government, then to us as farmers to work the land. I mean, it does sound utopian, and that does sound absolutely like an ideal. So I guess the question is, as an ideal, is it good or is it realistic? It's certainly not realistic, but as an ideal, I'm a fan. I think I'm on board.
Yeah, and obviously, I would argue that it's not realistic. I would argue that it's not ideal because so utopias of any kind are called utopias, and they have that negative connotation for a reason. There is no utopia on this earth. Right. And so there's a lot of problems that would come even with that ideal implementation of distributism. One is, so let's say you're older and you can't tend, a couple acres of farmland and a cow. What happens then? Let's say you have 10 kids. Do each of your kids then get their own X parcel of land distributed to them?
Plus,
they have to split up or share yours. Where does the government get that from? The Catholic government in this case. What happens in the eventual time, as it always has in history, where the government is no longer Catholic? You look at England and, Henry VIII and that type of thing. It's like Catholic government's good until it's not, until the government's no longer Catholic. So I think there are a lot of holes. Like, on a surface level, does it sound nice to own 40 acres of land and just kind of live off of that land with me and my family? Yeah, absolutely. I see where Chesterton's coming from. From a execution perspective, even if it's implemented ideally, I think there's just a lot of issues there.
No, it's interesting, and I think that it's a good. I like talking about it and thinking about it because I think there's this worship of either socialism or capitalism. It's like one or the other is
Hmm.
right. It is right, and I can tell you, I've lived now 8 years in Germany, which is like a democratic socialism
Yeah, dirty
kind of.
socialists.
It's it's yeah. I know Americans are like what the, but it's really not. I mean, it's pretty capitalistic in a lot of ways, but more regulations, you have, socialized healthcare, et cetera, and it's great. I mean, right now, but it is. I mean, and it's going to collapse because there's no more babies. So I mean, it is an absolutely flawed thing, which will collapse within, for sure, within 50 years, probably within 20. Um, but right now, it's fantastic. It is. I mean, I've lived here 8 years. It is really good. I mean, you don't pay that much taxes, and you get absolutely free healthcare. It's awesome.
And
Okay, okay,
how's the government?
you're
Do
paying
they let
insurance.
you own do they let you own firearms and homeschool your children?
No, right, and then that's yeah, exactly. There are definitely downsides to living in Germany. That is absolutely the case.
Well, and
But
so I guess my
quality
point
of
is those
life,
things go together, right? The large government that
sure,
abuses its power and its citizens goes with having, universal health care, that type of thing.
fair, and I think that that's something that in the U.S. you have a benefit that the states are still pretty separate and separate enough that if you live in California, you're like, hey, look, this is terrible. And then you move to Iowa, and it's like, hey, this is pretty nice, and that is a really really good thing in America that they have a lot of really big issues now because the government has run amok, but there is certainly more freedom. And that is absolutely true. And I think that even though America is more of a mess right now and harder to survive, I think with rent, et cetera, the prospect in the next 50 years looks better in America than Germany. And I would dare anyone to argue that because I don't think you can, because the socialistic system, which works pretty well right now in some ways, at least, is going to crash and burn. But anyway, again, going a little off topic, but I mean, the idea again that capitalism, socialism are these perfect systems. They're obviously not. I mean, I've said many times I'm a fan of kind of your Catholic socialism, in a way, feudalism almost. You have a king, and but the king is just kind of generally in charge. And then it was much more, regional. You had these, regional lords and dukes, etc., and they were in charge of their area. And then you had the magistrates in the towns, and they were in charge. And it was much more local. It was much more, hey, I know everyone in my town, and I know the guy who's going to make all the laws practically. The king would sometimes send taxes and stuff, but if he invoked too many taxes, then they rose up and tried to kill him. They were much more. It was much more of a, oh, you did this, oh fine, I'm bringing my pitchfork. And now because it's so globalized, it's so far away, you can't say, oh, Angela Merkel, you're going to do this to me, fine, then I'm going to bring my baseball bat to your door. And I mean, you see it sometimes, but it just doesn't really happen. So there's not that come up, and so they're just like, oh, we're gonna do whatever we want because there will be no, I can be a terrible leader and it doesn't matter. And anyway, sorry, I'll end here quickly, but the also what I liked about it was that the Catholic Church was in charge of a lot of these socialized systems. So right now, exactly as you said, I think the German socialized system does a lot of things well, but what you pay for that is lack of freedom. So when the church did it, you had the church was really the one who would get funds through donations, etc., and they would take care of the poor, they would take care of the education, they would take care of different the sick, and it was moral. And obviously now we have a government who does it that is absolutely immoral, and so it is also a broken system. But I think both systems are fairly broken, but I would generally lean towards capitalism being safer because it has a bit more freedom.
Mm. Well, so a governmental system is only going to be as good as the people it rules, right? And so we know how to get utopia. That's have a society full of just a bunch of saints trying to get to heaven, right?
Yeah.
That'll be utopia. That'll be heaven on earth. Well, as close as it gets. We don't have that now. We will never have that. We've never had that in the history of the world. And so there is no perfect system. And distributism isn't that.
Yeah, I can't really disagree with you. I mean, I think it is kind of a too good to be true idea. And I think especially now, who would do it? I mean, it's a really good question. We talked recently about, okay, if we were presidents, would we be better than Donald Trump? Okay, then let's say we become president. We say, okay, we're going to enforce a new, legislation. It's going to be distributism. Every single person in the country gets 10 acres, et cetera, which we could do. America's huge. huge.
Oh, every single person could get.
So here's another question:
1,000 acres.
How do you determine who gets land in South Dakota and who gets land in California? Just so it's a really tough question. So it's not that simple. So is it merit based? Is it based on birth? Is it based on so it is pretty utopian. It doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense, but I like the idea. I like the idea of people going back to the land. And I think that's something that everyone should try to do it the best you can. Even if it's with hobbies, learn how to bake or cook or grow plants. I do really believe God intended that. And I think we live in a world where for goodness sake, I'm podcasting on YouTube. So I'm not going to be too hypocritical here. I'm trying not to be, but I do think, again, whatever we can do with our hands in the dirt, I think that it's good for our bodies, minds, and souls. And I think that we should try to do that. But I think I'm going to agree with you here at the end. It has a lot of good things to it. I think it had a really almost childish naivete, in the idea, this real desire of goodness in people, but it would never work. And I think I'm going to have to in the end here agree with you that distributism sounds good, ain't going to happen.
Awesome.
What do you guys think? Distributism, capitalism, communism? No communism, guys. No communism. Communism is forbidden by the church, so don't even go there. But otherwise, socialism, in some cases, I was actually just reading an encyclical by Pope Pius XI, I believe, who actually did say socialism in some forms is good, as we just described. Socialism, if it is in the hands of an evil government, obviously is bad. And yeah, right now Germany has kind of survived, but going downhill, guys, going downhill. So say a prayer for the socialist countries in Europe, because we don't have babies anymore, and that's a big problem. So anyone who wants to marry some single guys, I have some friends over here in Germany. So
well, I am king. Oh, king, eh? Very nice. And how do you get that, eh? By exploiting the workers, by hanging on to outdated imperialist dogma which perpetuates the economic and social differences in our society. Shut up! Will you shut up? Ah, now we see the violence inherent in the system. Shut up! Oh, come and see the violence inherent in the system! Help! Help! I'm being repressed!